The Green River is a beautiful sight. I went down it for, I think, the fourth time last year, and there are three different sections to the Green River. It's really beautiful for kayaking and canoeing, one of the best areas in the whole United States. It goes through a canyonlands, which is also called the Badlands, because that's where all kinds of bad people used to hide out. The drive to it is so beautiful in most places. Now, the first part from LA and Orange County is kind of boring, Vegas, and the next 50 miles after Las Vegas are kind of boring, but afterwards, the geology gets really fantastic with beautiful scenery, beautiful cliffs and mountains. I really enjoyed the drive, although the first 50 miles were a little bit boring. Here, one of the most beautiful places that I saw was the Spotted Wolf Canyon on the drive. This was in the San Rafael Reef, which was a huge reef about 30 miles wide. And in the 1800s, 1700s, nobody could pass through it because it was so narrow, so dangerous. Opened up until 1956. And in 1956, they finally put a little road through it. And as you can see on this particular picture, if you look way to the left, you see this black spot. That's a car. That will show you how big this whole thing is. It's just a wonderful, very majestic sight when you're going right through it. So going over down to Green River, I visited a Mormon fort. And this was part of a restored fort that was on the way. So I just thought I'd stop by and take care of it. Okay, talking about the Green River. Green River for kayaking and river rafting is primarily divided on the lower part in three different sections. You have, as you can see right here, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, you have Green River, the town of Green River, and you have where it starts. And if you take the all three sections, 120 miles, you go all the way down to look at the bottom where you see Stillwater and you see the confluence where the blue arrow is. So you start at the top blue arrow, go to the bottom. That's about a 10-day, 12-day trip. And I would recommend it unless you really want to get away from civilization for a long time. Now, it has three different sections, and I'll just cover the sections briefly. This time I'm going to be showing pictures of the third section. And incidentally, this map is from the Canyonlands River Guide by Belknap, and it's waterproof. If any of you ever decide to go down that area, buy that guide because it's a fantastic guide to the area. Okay, section 1 is the Labyrinth Canyon section. Starts right up here. Do you see the blue, when you see the blue arrow right there, this is where it starts and goes down about 64 miles down to here where it's mile 50. These are mileage markers from the Colorado River. This point right here is 100 miles from the Colorado River. This point is 50 miles, and there's where the Colorado River and the Green River meet. So if you decide to go 64 miles, you would go from here to here, and the topology is totally different than the lower part, Canyonlands, and I'll show you in a minute. The second section is from Ruby Ranch to Mineral Canyon, and that's only 45 miles. And then finally, I'll show you the third section, which this is what you're going to see the pictures. Oh, by the way, these are the pictures from the second section or the first part of the river. And you'll see the topology and the mountains are different, the grasses are different. You can see our tents. This was from a river trip that I took about 10 years ago. And you see the tents down below and the river passing by right there. So this was a long time ago, but it was on the upper part. The next section is the lower part. This is what I'll be showing you pictures of. Starting at 50 miles right here, going down to 0, which is again the confluence. That's where they both meet, and that's where we pull out. Depending on the level of the river, sometimes we pull out right at the Colorado River, sometimes we pull out about 2-3 miles inside the river. But you got to be careful because you can see right here, Cataract Canyon. This is a Category 5 rapid. If you miss the pull out, and there's only one on the Colorado River, you're going to be stuck on the Cataract Canyon. And I don't know if any of you, I am sure some of you are familiar with Powell and his expeditions down the river, he lost a whole bunch of boats and people down it because Cataract Canyon is a level or class 5 rapid, and you don't want to be there at all. So you want to pull out before it. Now, we're starting to go into Canyonlands. We use outfitters to take us there. So they take us and drive us to the river, and then they go and pick us up at the end of the river, where we pull out in our kayaks and canoes. We can rent the kayaks from them, we can rent the canoes from them, and they first start driving us through the Canyonlands to the Canyonlands National Park, which is 19 miles from Moab, Utah. That's where we wind up in Moab, 19 miles from Moab to where we pull in for Section 3. We require a permit just to use the road, and camping permits are required. And for those of us who are going down the river in the kayaks or canoes, we have to get a permit from the Bureau of Land Management. And they issue the permit, it costs about $35. Now, the reason I like to go down to section number 3 is because it is the most remote section. Section 1 and 2 of the river are more populated as with people. On this last section, I only saw 4 other canoeists or kayakers the entire 7 days. That tells you how desolate it is. You do not have any telephone contact. You do not have any roads. And it's just beautiful, beautiful canyons, peace and quiet, and the stars at night are absolutely fantastic. Okay, Canyonlands National Park was first occupied, Indians were there 10,000 years ago. And since then, Canyonlands is 527,000 square miles, whereas Arches Park, which is much more popular, is only 527 square miles, not 1,000. Arches is only 119 square miles. And Arches has many more visitors. It has about 1.5 million visitors a year. Canyonlands is much more remote, harder hiking, biking trails. It's called the Badlands in many cases. It's very, very beautiful. Okay, I took this one picture in black and white just in the honor of Ansel Adams, who took all the fantastic pictures. I don't come close, but at least it's a black and white picture that you can take a look at. The next section is the lower part. This is what I'll be showing you pictures of. Starting at 50 miles right here, going down to 0, which is again the confluence. That's where they both meet, and that's where we pull out. Depending on the level of the river, sometimes we pull out right at the Colorado River, sometimes we pull out about 2-3 miles inside the river. But you got to be careful because you can see right here, Cataract Canyon. This is a Category 5 rapid. If you miss the pull out, and there's only one on the Colorado River, you're going to be stuck on the Cataract Canyon. And I don't know if any of you, I am sure some of you are familiar with Powell and his expeditions down the river. He lost a whole bunch of boats and people down it because Cataract Canyon is a level or class 5 rapid, and you don't want to be there at all. So you want to pull out before it. Now, we're starting to go into Canyonlands. We use outfitters to take us there. So they take us and drive us to the river, and then they go and pick us up at the end of the river, where we pull out in our kayaks and canoes. We can rent the kayaks from them, we can rent the canoes from them, and they first start driving us through the Canyonlands to the Canyonlands National Park, which is 19 miles from Moab, Utah. That's where we wind up in Moab, 19 miles from Moab to where we pull in for Section 3. We require a permit just to use the road, and camping permits are required. And for those of us who are going down the river in the kayaks or canoes, we have to get a permit from the Bureau of Land Management. And they issue the permit, costs about $35. Now, the reason I like to go down to section number 3 is because it is the most remote section. Section 1 and 2 of the river are more populated as with people. On this last section, I only saw 4 other canoeists or kayakers the entire 7 days. That tells you how desolate it is. You do not have any telephone contact. You do not have any roads. And it's just beautiful, beautiful canyons, peace and quiet. And the stars at night are absolutely fantastic. Okay, Canyonlands National Park was first occupied, Indians were there 10,000 years ago. And since then, Canyonlands is 527,000 square miles, whereas Arches Park, which is much more popular, is only 527 square miles, not 1,000. Arches is only 119 square miles. And Arches has many more visitors. It has about 1.5 million visitors a year. Canyonlands is much more remote, harder hiking, biking trails. It's called the Badlands in many cases. It's very, very beautiful. Okay, I took this one picture in black and white just in the honor of Ansel Adams, who took all the fantastic pictures. I don't come close, but at least it's a black and white picture that you can take a look at. I was taking this from the banks of the river. Okay, to get to the mineral bottom, that's where we're starting, and we're floating the Stillwater section, which was section number 3 on the map. You have to go down a cliff, and the outfitter takes you, and you take a ride all the edges of the cliff, and you can see the river way down. If you look right in the middle, you see the river down there, the Green River, right in the middle of the canyon. And it takes about 40 minutes to get down because it's a kind of a treacherous road, but they're experts. They've been doing this for 30 years, and they will gladly take you down the road, of course, for a fee. Here's a map of the entry point of Mineral Bottom. Where my cursor is, this is where we pull in. This road right here comes down from the top of the mountains, which is about 2,000 feet higher, comes down to the landing, and this is where they unload the kayaks and let me go. I went all by myself, so this is where they let me go right there. This road is mostly impassable, and it goes up to the top of the cliff, not where we are currently down on the bottom of the river. All right, the first picture of the river. Well, before we start the river, here's the kayak on the left is all the crap I brought with me that wouldn't fit in the kayak. Okay. So I had to get back. I have my metal detectors, I have my cameras, I have my tripods, I have all kinds of stuff which actually didn't fit in the kayak. So after removing 3/4 of the stuff I took, this on the right, this is how my kayak looked after I loaded it up with everything that I could possibly load up. And so the lesson is here, when you're going down the river in any of these rivers, Colorado or Green or whatever, pack everything up and then throw away half of the stuff, because that's way too much. Here I am just leaving the bottom, the mineral bottom, and every corner of the river there's a bottom. Queen Anne's bottom, mineral bottom. There's Tidwell bottom, Woodruff bottom. I couldn't figure out first how come there's so many bottoms and who keeps leaving Queen Anne bottom. Who keeps leaving their bottoms around the river? But that's what that means, is that there is the end of a wash or a flat area, and that's where the bottom, they call it the bottom. I have no idea why, so that's it. So you can see the river is very calm. There are no rapids on this whole section of the river. What there is, though, are a lot of cliffs and a lot of brush, and it's kind of hard to find camping spaces. So you have to be very careful that you do find and you don't miss a camping space, because you don't want to be floating at night and not have a camping space. The first section of the river right here, as you can see, we go by the Saddle Horse bottom, and we go up Upheaval bottom, and Powell, Major Powell, who went down the river, and that's the lake is named after him, explored this whole area, and he has a ton of little notes about what he found, what he didn't find. Like I camped by Horsethief Canyon, went hiking up Horsethief Canyon, where I found some Indian artifacts, and you can't touch anything. This is a national park, You're not allowed to take anything out whatsoever. When I first went down this with Steve, 40, he says 50, maybe 40, 50 years ago, it was not a national park. And people were allowed to take out arrowheads, were allowed to take out all kinds of other things. And I'm glad it is now a national park and you cannot take that history out, which is very fantastic. Here's one of the first things I see as I'm going around the corner, and you can see this future art in several million years. This will be an arch, most likely empty, but it just was an amazing sight when I was paddling. And this is a picture of it right head on as I'm passing by the arch. You can't really imagine the size of this, because if you had a person standing down on the bottom, you wouldn't see him, it'd just be a black dot. So you're talking about a couple thousand feet above you. And it's just a fantastic, amazing sight. Here's another corner as I was turning. Look at all this, and you just, when you're there, this doesn't even give you a sense of how huge this is. There might be so many hidden cliff dwellings up there. There might be so many hidden items. Had bandits going through there and hiding their gold and hiding their treasures and bank robberies. You never know what's up there, and it's just a different topography than anywhere else, and it's fantastic. Hey, all of a sudden I see Steve Coletti on my thing here. Huh. Okay, so can you guys see me?
No.
Good. Good. I'm having a bad hair day. That's why. Okay. Now, this one important thing is when we're going down the river, we want to go down the river in the morning, because in the afternoon, the winds come up. And this is one of the times when I was on the river a little bit later, like 1 or 2 o'clock. And as a result, the winds were pushing me back up the river. So I had to paddle really hard for several hours to be able to go down the river. So the trick is, if any of you do go down that river, make sure you leave in the morning, 7:30, and then find a campsite by 12 or 12:30, because you're going to be really working hard against the wind. I remember one time, and Steve probably remembers one time when we went, we had to get out and we had to pull the rafts. We were in rafts that time. We had to pull the rafts behind us because the wind was so strong, our rafts were going up the river. Now, we can talk a little bit about the weather. When I was here, the weather was in the 70s and the low 80s. At night, it was in the high 40s and low 50s. This was April. The reason I usually choose April, because you don't have any mosquitoes in April and May. If you go in July, August, September, the mosquitoes come out in hordes and you have to fight them. I don't like mosquitoes, so this is the best time to really go, is April and May down the river. Usually this is how the river looks when you leave in the morning. It's ideal for floating. We do about 15 miles a day, 10 to 15, depending on which we are. The temperature, as I mentioned, is in the 70s, 40s at night. Now, nowadays, we really don't exactly know what the temperature is going to be because of the weather. It's been very, very strange. I remember one time we went, it was snowing in April. And but this last 3 times I went, and I see the temperature is misspelled. Oh, well, I should have proofed it better. Sorry about that. The last 3 times I went, the temperature was in the 70s in April, which was very, very nice. And it did not rain except at night, just a little bit. This is my first campsite. And since the river fluctuates up and down, what you can see is that it's a little bit muddy. When I try landing, the river was pulled back. There's a dam way, way, way up the river. When they release or hold back some of the water, depending on the needs of, and depending of how much water there is. Now, what happened here, you can probably see my butt marks in the mud because I dropped in there several times trying to pull the kayak up and try and take the stuff out. But this is the only muddy campsite that I had during that particular time. So I started putting up a tent, and I put up a tent in this wash. And the tent was up, I was fine, except I looked way back in the distance and I saw some clouds. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, those clouds may be 10 miles away, 15 miles away, but I am in a wash. What happens if those clouds start dropping? They might just come down this wash. So I moved my campsite to right here, a little bit above the wash. And you can see how beautiful it is. It's so fantastically remote. Nobody else there. I only saw 2 other kayaks or canoes during the entire trip, which was absolutely fantastic. And this was a great hiking area. So I spent almost a whole day in this area hiking around. Take a look at this right there. Isn't this a pretty sight? You can go hiking, you will not see, don't hear planes, don't hear cell phones, don't hear cars, don't hear anybody except for some animals. And you hear sometimes wrestling in the bushes, you see a deer occasionally, but it's a beautiful, beautiful sight right there. There are all kinds of flowers. Now, I don't know the names of flowers. I'm not except for roses, I can't tell you what this flower is called. But there were lots of all kinds of flowers in this deserty type areas throughout the whole region. Look at that. This thing is growing right out of the sand. And if you look at its tributaries right here and over there and right here, all these are going to be blooming flowers. And they were all over the region, all over the area. This was part of my dinner, a beef stroganoff. And as you can see right here, this is a really cool heater or stovetop that I just hook up to the propane, and it heated up. I was cooking beef stroganoff. Sometimes I had spaghetti, sometimes beef stroganoff, sometimes bars. I had the oatmeal, all kinds of different things. This right here is a required pan. You cannot now go in the park without having a fire, what's called a fire pan. So you have to have that with you. This is sunset. Beautiful, beautiful sight on the river. And almost every evening you had such a fantastic sight. So it's just, I cannot even explain to you how beautiful it is when you're out there peaceful without any total interruption. The only thing you hear occasionally, you will hear birds or lots of birds, and you will hear beavers.